Anyone who knows me will tell you that I'm a big fan of animals, from stopping to pet dogs or watch birds, all the way up to learning to scuba dive because I wanted to see fish up close. However, there is one type of animal fan that I've never really found myself connecting with. Horse girls. Maybe it's the stereotype around horse girls, or maybe it's the fact that horses are just fundamentally ill-constructed creatures, but I felt like in the Chinese year of the horse, it was fitting for me to try and bridge that divide. Horses, however, are incredibly expensive, and I don't have that kind of money, so I'm going to do the next best thing. A Pokemon Nuzlocke using only horses. This challenge will follow most of the standard Nuzlocke rules. If a Pokemon faints, it's dead forever, I have to nickname all of my Pokemon, and I can't have any duplicate Pokemon, meaning that I can only have one of each eligible evolution line. Normally you can only catch the first Pokemon you encounter on any given route, but given the somewhat limited pool of encounters I've got in this run, I will be ignoring that rule this time. On top of the standard Nuzlocke rules, I'll also be adding some hardcore rules in, because I'm a competitive player and these games are way too easy. I won't be allowed to use any items in battle, although held items are allowed. My Pokemon's level can't exceed that of the next gym leader's ace. I'll be playing on set mode, meaning I can't switch my Pokemon for free whenever I get a KO. I won't be allowed to Dynamax, and of course, I can only use horses. Some say this challenge is impossible, but I'm here to prove the naysayers wrong. With all of these rules in place, it's time for me to set out on my journey to become not so much a horse girl, but more of a horse man. So I named my character Bojack. The first thing I have to do is choose my starter, and the options are a rabbit, a monkey, and a weird lizard thing. Clearly none of these are horses, and so it doesn't matter which I pick, so I grab Grookey and move on. With my temporary not horse by my side, I speed through the early game, battling Hop, running into a dog that's seemingly meeting Professor Sonia and getting the Pokédex, battling Hop again, picking up a useless Space Rock and putting it on a useless bracelet, and then finally making my way to the wild area where the run can truly begin. But before I catch my first horse of the run, I should probably clarify what I'm counting as a horse. It seems like it should be pretty obvious, right? Mudsdale, that's clearly a horse. Corviknight, that's very clearly not a horse. But there are some areas where it gets a little bit muddy. Zebstrika's a zebra. Do we count that as a horse? Zebras are in the taxonomic genus Equus, which includes all extant horse species, but they have their own subgenus, Hippotigris, which is distinct from horses. And most definitions list zebras as related to horses, but not actually horses themselves. And what about something like Rapidash? That's a unicorn, which is a mythological creature clearly based on a horse, but that's not actually a horse. Thankfully, there is actually an objective way built into the game to determine whether or not a Pokemon is a horse. Horsepower is defined as power of or pertaining to a horse, just trust me on that one, don't look it up. So it stands to reason that the more horsepower a Pokemon has, the more horse-like it is. Thus, any Pokemon with a high amount of horsepower must necessarily be a horse, and any Pokemon that is a horse must necessarily have a high amount of horsepower. Logically, we can then conclude that any Pokemon that learns the move High Horsepower, a move whose animation is literally kicking the opponent with a horseshoe, must be a horse. And any Pokemon that doesn't learn High Horsepower is not a horse. So Zebstrika, that's a horse. Rapidash, that's a horse. Spectria, weirdly, not a horse. Anyway, with boring definitions out the way, it is time that we encounter our first horse of the run. Onyx, which I nicknamed Secretariat. That's followed very quickly by Epona the Mudbray. Naturally, all my horses need to actually know the move High Horsepower, so I teach it to them right away. Please don't ask how long it took to get all of these TRs. With my 2 equine encounters in tow, I head over to Motorstoke, where, true to the UK that inspired the Galar region, some rowdy football fans fight me in a hotel lobby. After being introduced to the concept of the gym challenge, I get myself the most mane-like haircut I could find and set off for Turffield for the first gym. On the way there, I have to battle Hop again, and this time he's a little bit trickier. His lead Wooloo gets taken out by one swift kick from Mudbray, but he immediately brings out his Sobble. With only Onyx and Mudbray on my team, Sobble's water guns are threatening big, super effective damage. Thankfully, Water Gun isn't a particularly powerful move, so Mudbray is able to take one quite comfortably before dropping Sobble's speed with Bulldoze, and finishing off with a second Bulldoze on the following turn. Onyx can then switch in on Hop's final Pokemon, Rookidee, and finish the bird off with no issues. I've escaped Hop this time, but I need an answer to that Sobble soon before it becomes even stronger. My next 2 encounters don't help with the water problem though, as I grab Megan the Stallion, the Drillbur, and Gunpowder the Roly-Coly from Galar Mine. Roly-Coly isn't actually a horse, so I can't use it just yet, but it will become a horse once it evolves into Carkol. As I leave the mine, I'm accosted by Bede, angsty teen and professional Chairman Rose bootlicker, whose physically frail psychic types are promptly dispatched by my growing legion of physical attackers. This will be a running theme for battles with him. Now that I'm through Galar Mine, I can challenge Milo's Grass Gym. Before I do though, I go back to grab a couple of encounters that were a bit too high level for me to get before. The first is Red Run the Diggersby, who isn't that useful, but the second will be a key member of the team going forward, and that's Quagsire. Quagsire's water absorb ability makes it entirely immune to water-type attacks, a type that hits all of my other horses super effectively, and not only that, but it heals when it's hit by water-type moves. This can be a bit of a cheat code in certain battles thanks to the AI not being particularly smart. I can bring in Quagsire on a water-type attack and heal, which then means the AI is not going to go for another water-type attack. I can then switch my Quagsire into something that is weak to water on a non-water move, and then that baits another water move from the AI. I can switch back into my Quagsire, heal again, and kind of repeat that process. Quagsire won't be that helpful in the first Grass-type gym, but it will be about the only thing that really gives me a chance into Nessa and her water types once we get there, especially her Dreadnought, and it's also incredibly valuable into Hops, Drizzile, and eventually Inteleon. So please give a warm welcome to Seabreeze, the Quagsire to be who doesn't have Water Absorb. Well, naturally, this makes a future Nessa fight a bit harder, but I guess having a horse that takes water moves neutrally is more than I had before, so I'll take it. Either way, we have to get through Milo first. I'm going to be leaning very heavily on Carkol here, since it's my only horse that isn't weak to grass, and it can hit back with super effective fire-type moves. If I just had to battle Milo's Gossifleur and Eldegoss normally, then this would absolutely be enough to get me through the battle, but there is quite literally a very big problem in front of us, and that is Dynamax. I'm not able to Dynamax my horses in this challenge, but opposing trainers can Dynamax their Pokemon, doubling their HP pool and giving them access to strong attacks with powerful secondary effects for 3 turns. Weathering this storm is going to be the hardest part of these battles, and that is too much to ask Carkol to do alone. Or at least it would be if it weren't for something that I found earlier in the run. When I was in the Motorstoke Pokemon Center, I noticed a shopkeeper selling TMs. Most importantly, he was selling the TM for Protect. Protect normally allows a Pokemon to block all incoming moves for a turn, but can fail if used twice or more in a row. Max moves aren't blocked fully, still dealing a quarter of their full damage and activating their secondary effect, but this is enough to make my opponent's Dynamax Pokemon manageable. With Protect taught to all my horses, I herd a bunch of Wooloo and get to the battle with Milo. All my horses have been brought right to the cusp of leveling up here, as Nuzlocke rules usually state that level caps end at the start of a gym leader battle, so if your Pokemon level up during the battle, that's fine, and I think I'm going to need all the help I can get to take down the grass leader. I lead off with Carkol into Gossifleur and Flame Charge to deal big damage and boost my speed. Luckily for me, Gossifleur also wants to boost its speed and goes for a Rapid Spin instead of the much more damaging Magical Leaf, so I can easily pick it off next turn with another Flame Charge, having taken a total of 2 damage. Now comes the bigger threat. Milo's Eldegoss goes for its Dynamax, and Carkol takes reduced damage from Max Overgrowth thanks to a Protect. Max Overgrowth sets up grassy terrain as a secondary effect, which does heal off the damage I took through Protect that turn, but it also boosts the damage of the second Max Overgrowth coming my way. Carkol can't safely Protect this turn, so I fire off a Flame Charge for some damage and brace for impact as a terrain-boosted Max Overgrowth comes out, which Carkol actually takes super easily. Even a crit there wouldn't have been close to getting a KO. Another Protect lets me tank a Max Strike, which Milo decides to go for some reason, and now Dynamax is over, allowing Carkol to clean up with a few more Flame Charges without even needing to eat the Citrus Berry I gave it before the battle. I really thought that battle would be a lot harder and I might have needed to sacrifice one of my horses, but I'm absolutely not complaining. Having taken down the first major roadblock that didn't actually end up being a roadblock at all, I start my trip to Hulbury and make it about 3 meters before I have to stop Team Yell from harassing a doctor on a bridge. The doctor then proceeds to give me a whole bicycle that he was keeping in his pocket, I guess. This big long bridge is the perfect place to take my new bike out for a spin, but my test ride is rudely cut short by Hop, who demands to battle me again. His lead Wooloo is no issue at all, but the real battle starts when his Drizzile hits the field in front of my Mudbrave. If Quagsire had Water Absorb, this would have been completely trivial, but now I've got to be very careful. As my only horse that isn't weak to water, Quagsire is still my best bet to take down Drizzile. This time round though, it's running Water Pulse rather than the weak Water Gun it had last time I fought it, and Quagsire takes a big chunk of damage on the switch with a Confusion to boot. Not wanting to risk immediately hitting myself in Confusion, I have to make a tough decision. I need Quagsire back on the field not confused and without taking any more damage. Unfortunately, there's only one way to do that safely: to sacrifice one of my horses. Fortunately, the decision of who to sacrifice is incredibly easy because Onix is an awful Pokemon and the rest of my team aren't. Knowing his time is up, Secretariat the Onix dives into harm's way for the good of his comrades, but Hop doesn't even give him the mercy of a quick end. My cruel, sadistic rival draws out the inevitable with a growl on the switch-in and then a bind once Onix is already on the field. One Water Pulse 2 turns ago would have been more than enough, but Hop seems to delight in tormenting my doomed teammate. Eventually, with Onix weakened and bound in place, Hop pulls the trigger and puts an end to his misery. Rest in peace, Secretariat. You deserved a more merciful death. With rage in its heart, Quagsire takes to the field again to avenge his fallen friend, getting hit by a bind before firing off a powerful high horsepower that just barely misses the KO. Drizzile is now in torrent range, boosting the power of its Water Pulse, but thankfully the passive damage from bind puts me below half HP and activates my Citrus Berry, keeping me out of range of a non-crit Water Pulse. Knowing that Hop has super potions to use, I elect to go for a Mud Shot on the next turn to keep Drizzile out of torrent range next time, and to drop its speed so Quagsire might be able to outspeed it the turn after. Even though it turns out Drizzile is still faster, I should be able to take a Water Pulse from this range and KO with a high horsepower. But Hop instead elects to go for a Growl, reducing my damage enough that Drizzile survives the hit as bind damage takes Quagsire below half again. Trapped on the field by bind, there's nothing I can do but watch as a final torrent boosted Water Pulse takes the KO on sweet Seabreeze. Diggersby can come in to take the KO with a priority quick attack, and Corvusquire is easy pickings for Carcole, but the damage is already done as 2 of my beautiful horses are sent to the big farm in the sky. I won't soon forget this, Hop, you mark my words.
I will hurt you for this. A day will come when you think you're safe and happy, and your joy will turn to ashes in your mouth. And you will know the debt is paid.
My next stop is Nessa's water gym, and now I have a major problem. Every single one of my remaining team members is weak to water. If Quagsire had been water absorbed, then I'd never have lost it to Hop's Drizzile, and I'd have a water immunity locked and loaded for Nessa. But losing that ability coin flip is now threatening to snowball into a wipe. There is one final horse that I can pick up before this gym though, and it's gonna have to be my saviour. Enter Dreadnought, who I name Kelpie, which is a water spirit from Scottish folklore that takes the form of a black horse and drowns any humans it finds.
Horse facts.
Dreadnought is decent into Nessa's team, but it can't win the whole battle by itself. Without water-absorbed Quagsire, I will have to make some sacrifices to make it through. Nessa's opener is a Goldeen, which is incredibly weak, and Diggersby is able to take it out after hitting through a Waterfall's Confusion. Next up is Arrokuda, and this is where I have to start taking risks. Expecting an Aquajet, I switch into Mudbray, who takes the hit decently well and gets a defense boost thanks to its stamina ability. This means that without a crit, I'll be able to easily take another 2 Aquajets and KO in return. Nessa doesn't stick to the script though, and instead goes for a Whirlpool, ignoring my defense boost and trapping me on the field. If I don't get the one-shot here with high horsepower, I'm forced to risk a crit next turn on one of my best horses. High horsepower lands, and is enough for the KO. This battle has gone about as well as it could have so far, but now Nessa's Dynamaxing Dreadnought hits the field. Mudbray successfully protects through the first turn of Dynamax, but now there's another Max Geyser coming in that I can't protect against. My own Dreadnought is the only horse on my team that isn't going to drop to a rain-boosted Max Geyser in one hit, but I can't afford to take damage on Dreadnought or else it can't win the mirror match. I'm left with no option but to sacrifice another one of my precious horses. One Max Geyser later, and Redrum the Diggersby is no more. She knew this was always the plan going into this battle, and was happy to lay down her own life so the rest of us could soldier on. Thanks to Diggersby's noble sacrifice, my Dreadnought can now hit the field at full health, and protect against a Max Darkness on the last turn of Dynamax. A Razor Shell does a little under half, and thankfully doesn't get a defense drop, and I return fire with a super effective high horsepower. Protecting again stalls out the last turn of Rain, shutting off Nessa's Swift Swim ability, and my Dreadnought can safely outspeed and KO with a final Waterfall. It wasn't without casualties, but I've made it through the toughest part of the early game with only Kabu's fire types now standing between me and a whole lot more horses to add to my team. Before battling Kabu though, we have to go fetch him. After a nice meal with Rose and his realistic body standards for middle-aged men, I nab myself a Diglett named Bad Horse, and return to the mines that I so yearn for. Waiting for me there is Beady, who talks a whole lot of shit for someone who's about to be folded like an origami crane. I'm going to click liquidation 3 times. Spoiler alert. Oh, sorry, 4 times. My bad. And I wasn't wrong. A few uneventful Team Yell battles later, Kabu returns to his gym and I return to the hotel for another uneventful Team Yell battle. The fire gym does require me to catch at least 2 non-horses, which I promptly release, and then it's time for the gym leader. With an army of fire types, this promises to be a lot easier for my team than the grass and water gyms. Dreadnought cures a burn from Kabu's lead Ninetales thanks to a held Lumberry before dispatching it with a quick Waterfall. His Arcanine comes in to both intimidate and burn me again, but Waterfall still does a good chunk. A Bite Flinch delays the inevitable for a turn, but a Rock Tomb to lower Arcanine speed puts it in range of another Waterfall. Now Center Scorch hits the field, and this G-Max form can't be taken out quite so easily as others. Center Scorch's G-Max Centinferno applies a trapping effect to the target, and does passive damage over time. If it for some reason goes to that move into my Dreadnought, I'd be trapped on the field at -1 attack and burned, and I'd almost certainly lose my Dreadnought for it. Playing it safe, I switch into Carcole on a resisted Max Flutterby that drops my special attack, and another one on the following turn means that my Ancient Power barely tickles the giant bug. I need to switch Carcole out to reset my special attack drops, but nothing else on my team can take 2 hits from Center Scorch, and I don't want to risk getting trapped. The solution is obviously to throw Diglett under the bus, which I can't say I'm too upset about given how bad Dugtrio is. This gives me a safe switch back into Dreadnought, who's faster and can KO with a Rock Tomb even with the burn, winning me my 3rd gym badge. My new level cap opens up a whole load more horses for me to add to my stable, so I'll give you all the Spark Notes version. I get Potatoes the Munchlax, who took me a full 11.5 minutes of my finite time on this earth to catch, but at least it came with the leftovers attached. Snowmane the Swinub, Vogelherd the Rhyhorn, named after the Vogelherd horse, which is the earliest known sculpture of a horse.
Horse facts.
Bakushin the Beware, Strider the Cufant, and Triplophusus the Kingler. Triplophusus is a species of conch commonly known as the Florida horse conch.
Horse facts.
Once I arrive in Hammerlock, I go through some necessary cutscenes before doing a spot of clothes shopping. Look at this lovely casual jumper I found. After a mandatory art gallery trip, I help a child talk to his crush so he'll give me an apple, which I use to evolve an Applin I found earlier into Applejack the Appleton, along with evolving Epona into Mudsdale and Megan into Excadrill. I also found this weird bug with Appleton where I get a pop-up saying Ripen is activating every time I heal with leftovers, which is not at all how that works, but if you keep seeing Ripen come up on screen every single turn, that's why. After another very uninteresting run-in with Team Yell, I proceed to Route 6, where I reassemble a Dracozolt named Eohippus, which is the earliest known member of the taxonomic family Equidae in the fossil record.
Horse facts.
A Silicobra named Mamlambo, after a serpentine Zulu river deity with the head of a horse.
Horse facts.
And a Hippopotas, whose nickname is written in my favourite language. Symbol 3. The etymology of the word hippopotamus comes from the Greek hippos, meaning horse, and potamos, meaning river. What that means is that when you shorten hippopotamus to hippo, you're basically just saying horse.
Horse facts.
And that's a horse fact triple whammy, baby. This is an educational channel now. Comment below your favourite horse fact. One fact equals one education. Anyway, I've now got myself a whole load of new horses, but sadly this wasn't without incident. On Route 6, I carelessly ran into an optional trainer. They only had one Pokemon, a Sork, but my whole team is very weak to fighting types, and my Mudsdale wasn't at full health going into this fight. My lead Excadrill is forced to switch immediately into Mudsdale to try and get a stamina boost, but Sork goes for a very scary bulk up. I try to get the speed advantage with Bulldoze, but Sork goes for low sweep, lowering my speed and ensuring I stay slower. The first low sweep did 45 damage and gave me a defense boost, so I can comfortably take the next one and get a bit of extra damage before Mudsdale is forced to switch. Unless Sork gets a critical hit, which KOs instantly. I've lost a few horses so far in this run, but this is the first that really hurts. I really like Mudsdale as a Pokemon, and Epona has been with us from the start. I don't even have time to properly mourn though, as now I've got a team of entirely fighting weak physical attackers staring down a bulk up boosted Sork. I need to lock in so this doesn't get even worse. Next in is Beware, whose fluffy ability halves the damage from contact moves, effectively removing its fighting weakness in this context. A powerful strength is enough to put Sork in range of another one next turn, but a low sweep drops my speed and it looks like the next one might be a damage roll to KO me. Beware is an incredibly strong horse, and its normal typing is invaluable into the upcoming Ghost Gym, so I decide it's not worth risking it. That means I have to risk another horse instead, and I decide that Carkol is the one I'm most willing to lose here. Its Flame Body ability also means there's a chance Sork gets burned when it hits me, which would allow me to escape without any more deaths. That's what I thought at least, but that bubble is burst when the incoming low kick scores a one-hit KO on Gunpowder. I can bring in anything I like now to deal the last bit of damage and win the battle, but this was a harrowing day for Horsekind. Worst of all, I lost two of my favourite horses to a Pokemon whose cultural impact on the franchise amounts to a single D's nuts joke. Thanks to all my new encounters, I can replace the two fallen team members, but the emotional toil will be one that stays with me for the rest of the run. I finally arrive in Stowonside, licking my wounds from the disaster that just unfolded, and of course Hop is there to try and make things worse. This time though, the stables have turned, with Appleton being able to easily handle Hop's once-threatening Drizzile, and the rest of his team being no match for my equine army. Next up is Allister's Ghost-type gym, and my two normal-type horses with Dark-type moves let me breeze through the gym trainers. After taking a second to let the dizziness wear off, I take on the fourth gym leader. This battle also isn't too difficult, with Beware taking out Yamask and breaking Mimikyu's disguise for Copperajah to switch in and finish it off. A 120 base power Heavy Slam combined with Strider's attack boosting nature is enough to take out Cursula even after an attack drop from Baby Doll Eyes, and now the trap for Gengar is set. Gengar is Allister's Gigantamax target, and it has two moves that are very scary. Max Ooze, a poison-type move that boosts Gengar's special attack, and G-Max Terror, a ghost-type move that prevents the target from switching. Gengar being able to get either of those moves off would make this battle significantly harder, but there's a workaround. Copperajah is immune to poison, so Gengar is never going to go for a Max Ooze if it's on the field. This means it'll only ever go for G-Max Terror, or the much less frightening Max Darkness. This allows me to completely safely switch in my Snorlax, which is immune to ghost-type moves and can shrug off a Max Darkness with ease. Now Gengar is never going to use Max Terror, so I can switch back into Copperajah on the incoming Max Ooze, and back to Snorlax the next turn on another Max Darkness, successfully stalling out the Gigantamax. Snorlax is at -1 special defense, so I do one more switch into Copperajah on a Venoshock, then tank a weak Hex and KO Gengar with Heavy Slam to claim my 4th badge. Do you remember back at the beginning of the run when I was picking my starter, where I said, clearly none of these are horses, and so it doesn't matter which I pick? Well, I was slightly dishonest with you. While it's true that none of those 3 Pokemon are horses, it's not true that it didn't matter what starter I picked. You see, dear viewer, although Grookey may not be a horse, Rillaboom is. I feed my small monkey a large handful of steroids and evolve him into the beautiful horse he was always meant to be. And then I name him Donkey. We run into Bidet again, and this time he's breaking a historical landmark. It doesn't take long to bully him again with steel types, and then he gets kicked off the gym challenge for the aforementioned breaking of historical landmarks. Good job, dude, now not even Rose likes you. Once the mural fully collapses, Sonia has an epiphany about dogs, and we can move on to the next gym. Before arriving in Ballenly, I make my way through the Glimwood Tangle, where I grab myself a Galarian Ponyta named Rainbow Dash. Could have really done with the quad fighting resist earlier in the run, but oh well. Opal's Fairy Gym is so easy that even the children this game is made for would have a hard time staying awake. I've got 2 steel types, and in every single battle you get gifted free stat boosts. I sweep the entire gym leader with a single Excadrill despite it getting its attack dropped by Intimidate at the start of the battle. Cool. Following her defeat, Opal asks me to escort her to Hammerlock, where she immediately kidnaps Burrito to begin his yassification process. Plot points begin occurring nearby as Pokemon start Dynamaxing without warning, but I'm apparently not actually the protagonist of this game, so I don't need to worry about it, and the adults will sort it out off-screen. Hop decides I need to fight him yet again, and once again he poses no issue as Snorlax's massive special bulk lets him take on Inteleon with ease. Continuing my gym challenge, I make my way to Sirchester and grab Arvak the Golett and Boxer the Girder en route. Once in Sirchester, I treat myself to a nice pair of red shoes. Now that I'm suitably stylish, I can take on the Ice Gym. I make my way through the land of health and safety violations and kick off my battle with Melanie. Her lead Frostmoth is squished by Copperage's Heavy Slam, which brings in Galarian Darmanitan with access to Fire Fang. Fearing a fire move, I switch into Dreadnought on a harmless taunt and go for a Rock Tomb, only to be denied by not 1, not 2, but 3 consecutive flinches from Icicle Crash. I'm now forced to switch out again, this time into Beware. Full disclosure, I got Beware's fluffy ability confused with Fur Coat and forgot that it wouldn't reduce the damage from Icicle Crash. Luckily, I get bailed by Icicle Crash missing, which I don't feel too bad about given all the flinches. Had that not missed, I'd have had to risk a crit on Beware whilst trying to get the KO the next turn. One more Icicle Crash connects and mercifully doesn't flinch this time, and I take the KO with a powerful Brick Break. Next up is Ice-Q, whose only attacking moves are Freeze Dry and Icy Wind. Armed with a Lumberry in case of potential freezes, I go back into Copperager, who breaks Ice-Q's Ice Face with a first Heavy Slam before taking the KO with a second. Now we have to deal with Melanie's Gigantamax Lapras, who has the powerful stab combination of Ice Beam and Surf, and can set up Aurora Veil with his G-Max Resonance. I go for the usual strategy of protecting on the first turn of Dynamax, switching in Snorlax on the second turn, who takes less than half its HP from a rain-boosted Max Geyser, and then protecting again on the final turn as my thick fat Snorlax takes basically no damage from a G-Max Resonance. The Aurora Veil is now set up, but I came prepared for this, and after taking minimal damage again from an Ice Beam, Snorlax fires off a Brick Break to break the screens immediately. And so begins a war of attrition between the 2 bulky Pokemon, as I protect again to get through the last turn of Rain and get some leftovers recovery. A Sing on the next turn puts Snorlax to sleep, but the lack of damage from Lapras' Ice Beam means I don't lose much HP before I wake up and get the KO with 2 super effective Seed Bombs to earn my 6th badge. The next stop on my gym challenge is Spikemouth at the bottom of a snowy route full of ice types. However, I can't leave until Sonia is done giving me and Hop a somewhat boring history lesson talking about a couple of kings, some dogs, and a bath. Once class is dismissed, Hop remembers that we've not battled in at least 10 minutes and decides that we simply have to battle again. It's hailing this time around, which adds a layer of complication, but as usual I have no trouble clearing through his team. Beware takes out Dubwool, Dreadnought takes out Corviknight, and Excadrill takes out Pincurchin. But here's the catch. Between coming out of the Ice Gym and prepping for the snowy route down to Spikemouth, I boxed both my grass types before this fight. This obviously makes Inteleon a little bit trickier, but I can switch into the ever-reliable Snorlax to eat snipe shots for breakfast. There's a second catch. Inteleon now knows Liquidation, an equally powerful physical water-type move that targets Snorlax's weaker defense. The first one does a solid chunk of damage as I respond with a Seed Bomb. This isn't enough for the KO, and Hop goes for a Hyper Potion. In this situation, ideally I would have clicked Body Slam, but I'd taken it off Snorlax's moveset for Melanie's gym and hadn't put it back on yet, so another Seed Bomb drops Inteleon back down into Torrent range. The Torrent-boosted Liquidation lands a high roll this time around, leaving me on just 10 HP as I take the KO with Seed Bomb, but this is actually a disaster. The Hail is up, and Hail damage activates before Leftovers healing. The 12 damage from Hail is enough to bring my HP down to 0, and Potatoes the Snorlax is no more. The worst part is that, in spite of the concoction of things that went wrong before the battle even started, this death was entirely my fault. I'm not sure if Inteleon was in range of 1 tick of hail damage, but it was certainly in range of 2. All I had to do there was protect with Snorlax, and even if Inteleon survives that turn, I could have switched into a healthier horse to take the next liquidation and let Inteleon go down to hail the following turn instead. Potato's blood is on my hands, and I have to live with that for the rest of this run. I've not only let Potatoes down, but I've let the whole team down, and all I can do now is regroup and get my act together for the sake of those that still live on. At this moment, I vow in Potato's name that I'm not going to lose any more horses for the rest of this run. He may be gone, but his legacy will live on. This battle isn't over yet though, and once again deciding to rub salt in the wound that he created, Hop sends out his own Snorlax last. Beware is forced to not only relive, but reenact the death of his comrade, knocking Hop's Snorlax out with 2 brick breaks. Hop's cruelty truly knows no bounds, and this lights a fire in me. For as long as I draw breath, I will make myself the obstacle standing between Hop and his hopes and dreams. I will become champion, not only for myself and my horses, but also to see Hop fail. With anger driving me onward, I make my way to Route 9, where I once again find Team Yell harassing a hardworking healthcare practitioner who apparently also has a degree in mechanical engineering. In exchange for me clearing out the Team Yell grunts, he somehow upgrades my bike so that it can cycle on water too, allowing me to continue southwards. On the way, I grab myself a Bergmite, who I evolve into Knock the Avalugg. I arrive at Spikemouth to find that the main entrance has been locked, but fortunately my close personal friend Marnie knows a secret entrance, by which I mean an enormous hole in the city wall that anyone could find if they took 20 seconds to look around the side. She won't let me into this very secret and hidden entrance unless I beat her in a battle though. Beware adds yet another dark type to his list of victims as he knocks out Marnie's lead Lipard. Next out is Scrafty, who threatens me with super effective fighting type moves. I could almost certainly win this 1v1 with Beware, but I actually want Rapidash on the field as soon as possible to set up a chain of KOs into the rest of Marnie's team. Making its flamboyant debut, Rapidash comes in on a quad resisted Brick Break before firing back with a quad super effective Dazzling Gleam for an easy one-shot. Seeing a super effective poison move into my fairy type horse, Toxicroak comes in next and is also dispatched by a quad effective move, this time a Psycho Cut. Last up is Morpeko, who is also outspared and one-shot by Dazzling Gleam. A fantastic first appearance for Rainbow Dash, who also promises to be useful into Piers' upcoming Dark Gym. After figuring out the very challenging gym puzzle of walking in a straight line, and being accosted by some incredibly skilled acrobats, seriously, they should be considering a different career, their talent's wasted here, I get to Piers for the worst cutscene of all time as he soundlessly mimes into a microphone that's very clearly on. Like, the mic is on because there's feedback, which only happens if the mic is on. No wonder he's getting feedback, he's got his speakers directly behind him. He is pointing his own music directly at his microphone. That's the sound desk, it's just one guy with a single monitor. Why are we getting feedback now? We're nowhere near the speakers. Stop putting feedback noises in for no reason. Anyway, there's a Nuzlocke happening here, so let's get back to that. Piers opens with Scrafty, which is more easy pickings for Rapidash. Next in is Obstagoon. I could probably take this on with Rapidash, but I want to save its HP for later in the fight, so I instead switch to Beware as Obstagoon goes for Obstruct. A weak Throat Chop glances off my cuddly boy, and a quad super effective Brick Break doesn't get the KO. I know Obstagoon has good physical defense, but that is absurd. This Obstagoon also has counter, and if it had clicked it there, then it's bye-bye Beware. Guess I got a bit lucky with that one. Anyway, another Brick Break picks off the low HP Obstagoon and brings in Malamar, who threatens me with Psychic type damage. Rapidash switches back in on a resisted Psycho Cut, but a Dazzling Gleam isn't enough to KO. Fortunately, even a foul play crit there wasn't going to KO me, so I'm never in any danger, and a second Dazzling Gleam takes out the squid. Piers' final Pokemon is Skuntank, who only has Dark-type attacking moves, but Toxic and the Aftermath ability mean that any low-health horses I switch in are in danger of being KO'd by Skuntank posthumously. I have enough healthy horses left to make sure this isn't a problem though, with Girder and Hippowdon teaming up and switching out whenever hit by Screech defense drops to take the final KO and win me my 7th gym badge. Upon leaving Spikemouth, more major plot points take place that the adults don't invite me to, so I head straight back to Hammerlock. On the way I bump into Hop, who I might still be a touch mad at. Hop. I'm going to throw you off the side of this cliff. But other than that, I can challenge the Hammerlock gym straight away because pacing isn't real in this game. This gym is actually quite a fun puzzle for a VGC player like me, because all of the battles are double battles with some kind of weather-based strategy, and although it's nominally a Dragon-type gym, there's actually quite good type diversity. The first trainer has a Pelipper with Drizzle and a Sliggoo, and as will become a theme for this gym, it's Hippowdon's time to shine. Hippowdon's low speed actually works in its favour here, because when 2 weather setters enter the field at the same time, their abilities activate in speed order. This means that Pelipper's Drizzle goes first, followed by Hippowdon's Sandstream, and so the Sand stays up. Sand being up also gives Dreadnought a special defense boost to help it take on the 2 special attackers. I switch Hippowdon into Rillaboom straight away so I don't get hit by any water type attacks, but Pelipper sets a Tailwind as Sliggoo goes for a Dragon Pulse into Dreadnought as I hit a Rock Tomb that almost gets the KO on Pelipper. Now worried about the double up of flying and dragon moves into Rillaboom, I switch that slot into Rapidash, but again my opponent targets Dreadnought with Dragon Pulse. Thanks to the speed drop from Rock Tomb, Dreadnought outspeeds Pelipper in spite of the Tailwind and finishes it off with a Liquidation. Next turn I can safely take another Dragon Pulse and finish Sliggoo off with Dazzling Gleam and Rock Tomb. The next trainer focuses on Sun and leads with Turtonator and Ninetales. I lead the same as the first battle to get my Sand up and take an immediate KO on Ninetales with Dreadnought thanks to a held Lumberry healing a Will-O-Wisp burn, and a Shell Trap and Protect from Turtonator and Hippowdon do nothing. Next turn, I protect Dreadnought and Yawn the Turtonator to get around Shell Trap again, but it uses Dragon Pulse into Dreadnought to protect. I can switch Dreadnought and protect Hippowdon now, opening up a free KO next turn into the Sleeping Turtonator. Those have been pretty cool puzzles so far, but you're going to love this next one. Into the third trainers her kommo-o and Abomasnow, I use Dazzling Gleam and Brick Break. Cerebral stuff. Now we're on to Raihan, and his team is built around sand, so Hippowdon isn't needed for weather control here. Instead, I lead with offense, going for Dazzling Gleam and High Horsepower into Gigalith and Flygon as they miss a Steel Wing and set up Stealth Rock. I was expecting the double up of Gleam and Horsepower into Gigalith to get the KO, but missing out actually works in my favour here, as it allows me to switch Mamoswine into Hippowdon completely safely, as Rapidash picks up a KO on both Pokemon with a Dazzling Gleam. Hippowdon's Yawn is a key part of my strategy into the very scary Gigantamax Duraludon, who threatens big damage into my whole team while boosting with any of its max moves. Rapidash is under a lot of pressure and has to switch into Rillaboom, who takes a bit of Stealth Rock damage as Raihan goes for his Gigantamax. Max Steel Spike does big damage into Rillaboom, who is also hit by a Glare, and Yawn lands into Duraludon. I would love to protect both my horses here, but Rillaboom being paralyzed makes that risky, as I might fail to get the protect off. Instead, I switch into Dreadnought, but the next Max Steel Spike goes into Hippowdon as Sandaconda protects against my high horsepower. Duraludon's now asleep for the last turn of its Gigantamax, allowing me to get a couple of free hits into Sandaconda, but it comfortably survives thanks to the 2 defense boosts it now has from Max Steel Spike. On the next turn, Gigantamax is over, but there's a chance Duraludon wakes up now, and Body Press from its boosted defense stat threatens my fighting weak Dreadnought. I switch into Beware, since its fluffy ability lets it take physical hits from both of my opponent's Pokemon quite comfortably, but another Protect from Sandaconda and a Sleep turn from Duraludon mean I take no damage at all. Duraludon decides to cooperate and takes the maximum possible number of sleep turns, and a double up into Sandaconda finally takes it down, leaving me in a 2v1 situation. Duraludon is now guaranteed to wake up and lands a strong body press into Hippowdon, but I safely yawn it again as it takes some damage from Beware's Brick Break. Beware won't faint to a crit body press, so I protect Hippowdon on the next turn and connect another Brick Break as Duraludon does indeed hit into Beware. However, now that it's asleep again, I can safely switch in Rapidash just in case High Horsepower misses. Hippowdon's got my back though and connects the High Horsepower to get me the final gym badge. With all the gym badges collected, I take an uneventful trip up to Wyndon where I will be able to take on the Champion Cup. I do have more urgent business though, so I take a detour to pick myself up a lovely suit jacket, which finally completes my look. Okay, we need to play Spot the Difference. Look at that, beautiful. Incredible. We've completed the Bojack fit. With the important matters out of the way, I begin the first run of the Champion Cup, where they immediately force me to take off my wonderful outfit. The first battle is against Marnie, which doesn't end up being very difficult when she has movesets such as Toxicroak without a fighting move, or a Scrafty that keeps clicking Scary Face on my Appleton even though it's already slower than everything on her team. I spend most of the fight stalling out her Pokemon with Leech Seed and Protect, although I do click High Horsepower with Appleton for the first time in the entire run to get a KO on Morpeko. Her Gigantamax Grimmsnarl is stalled out in standard Protect fashion and cleared up by Beware and a couple of Drain Punches. And now comes the time for me to enact my ultimate revenge. On the big stage in front of all of Galar, the moment that Hop has always dreamed of, and I'm here to knock him off his high horse. All the suffering he's caused during my run, and all of the times he seemed to relish in my pain, they all come back to bite him here and now for the whole region to see. He starts the fight with his double, and I send in Appleton to do what he does best. Stall. Body Slam paralyzes me on turn 1, but I get my Leech Seed off. Between that and my leftovers keeping me healthy, Appleton's never at risk as Double is slowly whittled down, and I managed to burn one of Hop's full restores in the process. I'm so locked in for this battle that I even go as far as deliberately using High Horsepower to not KO the Double, but instead knock it into range of Leech Seed, so I can optimize the amount of healing I get. This shit is serious. Appleton now baits in Corviknight, which I decide to take on with Excadrill. I can't do too much damage to it with Rock Slides, but it's doing even less back with its only attacking moves being Steel Wing and Drill Peck. It does have Swagger, but thanks to Excadrill's held Lumberry, that would only boost my attack if Hop elected to go for that. 3 Rock Slides and 1 flinch later, Corviknight is down in the red, but Excadrill then misses 2 Rock Slides in a row to put itself in a bit of danger. Perhaps a touch overly safe as I'm not sure a crit Drill Peck would have KO'd me, but I switch into Copperaja to do the rest of the job. This brings in Snorlax, which has High Horsepower and Hammer Arm, but Golux switches in to take no damage from a Hammer Arm, and it can take it on easily with a couple of Drain Punches, ending up at almost full HP. Pincurchin comes in next, but its only attacking moves are Thunderbolt and Poison Jab, so Excadrill physically cannot lose this matchup. Pretty poor showing from Hop so far, honestly, but now the hard part of the battle begins, as his dreaded Inteleon hits the field. This time preparing to Dynamax, and with access to Icy Wind to hit my grass types for super effective damage. I switch into Appleton on the first turn of Dynamax, and thankfully Inteleon goes for a Max Geyser rather than a Max Hailstorm. The paralysis from turn 1 is threatening to be a problem here though, since I can't safely protect in front of Max Hailstorm. However, I figured I'd be taking too much damage on anything that I tried to switch into, An Appleton might be able to take a max Hailstorm regardless, since it was based on Icy Wind and wouldn't be max power. This turned out to be a stupid idea, as I fortunately did get the Protect, but the incoming max Hailstorm did way more damage than I expected. I'd left myself a 25% chance for Appleton to go down that turn, but never punished, I guess. I definitely need to be more careful going forward if I want to keep my promise to Potatoes and not lose any more horses. I now switch into Copperajah on another max Hailstorm, which activates my Citrus Berry to keep me healthy. I can now bring in Rillaboom on a Snipe Shot, and Icy Wind is never threatening to KO me, so I can go for Drum Beating for the KO. My plan goes a little off the rails though, and my heart sinks when I see Dark Pulse come out. And of course it flinches me. I now have no choice here but to risk a crit. If I switch something else in on a Dark Pulse, it'll do enough damage that whatever comes in is risking a Snipe Shot crit all the same. My best bet is to take a non-crit attack with Rillaboom, dodge the flinch, and hit a Drum Beating. Worst case scenario unfolds as Inteleon goes for another Dark Pulse. I hold my breath, praying for no crit, and Rillaboom holds. Now I have to pray again for no flinch. And Rillaboom fires off the Drum Beating, KOing Inteleon and ending Hop's chances of becoming champion. And with that, my path of vengeance is complete. For all he's taken from me, for all he's done to me, I have humiliated Hop on the biggest stage in front of an entire region, taking him down without losing a single one of my horses, and without using Dynamax. His dreams lie in ruins, and I stand proudly atop the rubble. Later that same evening, Leon is late to a dinner we planned. As it turns out, he was asked to have a meeting with Rose, which for some reason is seen as suspicious instead of a very normal thing. Oleana doesn't help the suspiciousness by declaring that nobody is allowed to interfere, and then hiding a key with a member of Macrocosmos, an organization that has been given no introduction at any point in the story, and I don't fully understand why we're fighting them. I play a weird game of hide and seek with this employee and beat him in battle 3 times, which ends up being entirely pointless because he doesn't even give us the key, and we only get our hands on it when Team Yell pickpockets him during a flash mob. We then proceed to storm a corporate headquarters because Leon is caught up in a meeting, which again is not a good enough excuse for breaking and entering, especially since the only consequence we know of is that he's late for dinner. Having marched through the lobby, we ascend the elevator of easy battles, during which Hop is characteristically difficult to work with and completely useless with his lead double against an army of steel types. We reach the big fancy meeting room and are stopped by Oleana. This battle starts simply enough, with her Frostlass dropping to an Iron Head from Copperajah, Salazzle dropping to a high horsepower from Golurk, and Milotic dropping to a Drum Beating from Rillaboom. Her Serena does cause some problems with acrobatics and attract, with Copperajah simply unable to hit through Infatuation twice in a row before getting crit by a Trop Kick, forcing it to switch out. Thankfully, Beware can tank an acrobatics on the switch thanks to Fluffy and heal off some of the damage with Drain Punch, while being immune to attract because apparently lesbians are illegal in Galar. Another crit from Serena does a bit more damage than I'd like, but Beware still comfortably survives before getting a KO with a final Drain Punch. In an ideal world, I'd have taken that last KO with Excadrill or Rillaboom in order to set up some easy switches in front of Garbodor on its Poison and Ground type max moves. However, it still works just fine to protect Beware on the first Max Quake, switch into Hippowdon on the second, Yawn on the third, and then protect and high horsepower for the KO. Having defeated Oleana, we rush past her to find Leon and Rose finishing up a conversation that seemingly would have ended much the same if we weren't there, meaning that all of our assorted crimes in the last 20 minutes achieved absolutely nothing. What a great evil team storyline this game has. I can now take on the second part of the Champion Cup, or at least I think I can until I'm rudely interrupted by Bed and Breakfast, now fully yassified and kitted out in trans colours. Trans rights, baby, what an icon. His wardrobe overhaul doesn't make him any more difficult to beat though, and he rolls over as usual when faced with the concept of a steel type. For a final time, we bid goodbye to this inept and confused diva. I hope he manages to sort out his whole identity crisis thing. Nessa is our next opponent, and her lead Gliscod looks scary at first, but its only bug move is First Impression, which only works on its first turn on the field. I lead with Appleton and protect immediately, meaning that Gliscod is now struggling to do any real damage to me even with a Swords Dance boost. A +2 liquidation does a sliver before Apple Acid forces Gliscod out thanks to emergency exit. Barraskewda comes in its place, which Beware handles easily, staying healthy with Drain Punch. The next Pokemon is Pelipper, which, with its Drizzle ability and its flying and water moves, is actually pretty scary. Step 1 is to remove the rain, which I do by switching in Hippowdon as Pelipper goes for a Tailwind, and then switching into Dreadnought, which can take it on thanks to the 50% special defense boost from being in sand. I do get confused by Water Pulse as I switch in, but I can switch out to Rillaboom on a second Water Pulse, and then back to Dreadnought on an Air Slash as Tailwind ends, setting up a KO with a Rock Tomb. Seaking comes in and threatens my grass types with Mega Horn, but all of its moves are contact moves, so I can go into Beware and take no damage due to Fluffy, once again KOing with Drain Punches to stay at full health. Gliscod re-enters the fight, and I need to use it to position the horse I want to be out in front of Dreadnought. It's never going to go for a resisted First Impression into Beware, so I'm free to switch into Appleton and Apple Acid for the KO to bring in the big Tortoise, which very unceremoniously goes down in one hit to an Apple Acid even in its G-Max form. Another check for Applejack, who's turning into a bit of a hero of this run. The third member of our pseudo-Elite Four is Allister, and it's once again Appleton who takes center stage to Leech Seed and stall out Dusknoir. Next up is Chandelure, who hits Dreadnought hard on the switch with a Shadow Ball. I would be dead to a follow-up crit, but Dreadnought is faster and extinguishes the candle with a liquidation. Sinistea comes out next, trying to Giga Drain my Rock Water Tortoise, but Rillaboom switches in and gets a one-shot with the Darkest Lariat. The penultimate ghost in Allister's lineup is Cursula, and the game plan is much the same as it was the first time we fought him. I need to KO Cursula with either Beware or Copperaja to set up the trap for Gengar, and this time I elect to go with Beware. Cursula drops to 2 Darkest Lariats, and then I begin switching between my normal and steel types on Ghost and Poison moves to stall Gigantamax, before taking the KO with an Iron Head. Last up is Raihan, who's a little easier to deal with in a single battle than a double battle, but he's still a bit tricky to figure out since he has very good type diversity and multiple different weather strategies to lead on. I've come up with a very fun plan for his lead Torkoal though. I lead my own Dreadnought, who is always baiting a Solar Beam. I can switch in Hippowdon on turn 1 to set up Sand, meaning the Solar Beam takes a turn to charge up, and then go into Appleton on turn 2 to take the quad-resisted half-damage Solar Beam for a grand total of 5 damage. From there, Torkoal with no Sun is a simple Appleton stall once more. Torkoal does yawn me, but I don't much care because Appleton isn't being used for the rest of the battle, and with Leech Seed up, Torkoal isn't exactly doing much to me anyway. Raihan uses a full restore once Torkoal hits low HP, which is great for me, and the stall continues. My HP does drop below half briefly, but Ripen finally activates correctly for the first time in the run, and my Citrus Berry heals me for 50%. Torkoal eventually drops, with Appleton still at max HP. Turtonator is up next, and I go to Copperaja hoping to take a resisted Dragon Pulse, but the turtle instead sets up a Sunny Day. I protect to stall a Sun Turn and potentially burn a Fire Blast PP, but Turtonator instead goes for Shell Trap, and then does the same again as I switch to Dreadnought on a baited Fire move. 2 Rock Tombs are enough to take my second KO of the battle, only taking a single Dragon Pulse in return. Goodra now comes in, but it has a strange moveset of Surf, Muddy Water, Rain Dance, and Thunder, so Rillaboom can sit in front of it just fine, and 3 Darkest Lariats are enough to take it out. Flygon is a little bit scary thanks to the combination of Earthquake and Dragon Claw. Beware would usually be fine in front of a physical attacker like this, but Earthquake isn't a contact move, so Fluffy doesn't reduce the damage. Fortunately, Flygon is never clicking Earthquake in front of Rillaboom, so I can get Beware in for free. It ends up being Sandstorm from Flygon on the turn that I switch, and as usual, Beware can Drain Punch twice to get the KO and stay healthy. Once again, Duraludon is the biggest issue on Raihan's team, largely due to the boosts it gives itself with all of its max moves. This means that my usual strategy of protecting isn't without risk, but it's still the best I have. Beware protects on a first Max Knuckle, and Hippowdon takes a second one fine. I protect again on the third Gigantamax turn, and Raihan for some reason opts to go for Max Rockfall, which I'm not complaining about. Gigantamax is now over, but I'm not out of the woods, because this Duraludon is at +2 attack. A Dragon Claw on the next turn still does about half to my physically bulky Hippowdon, and I'm able to get off a Yawn and then protect on the next turn. I have 1 guaranteed sleep turn to work with now, but I can't safely stay in with Hippowdon because a crit Dragon Claw will be enough to KO me. The issue is that the same is true of all of my horses in the back, so I determine that my best odds of victory are to stay in and high horsepower twice. If Duraludon stays asleep for more than 1 turn, or if I dodge crits and flinches, then I'll be fine, so the odds are in my favour. The first high horsepower connects, but Duraludon does get the turn 1 wake up and launches an Iron Head, which comes with a scary 30% flinch chance. I manage to avoid the crit, and I avoid the flinch. Hippowdon the hero lands 1 final high horsepower, and our horses have claimed another deathless victory, with only Leon remaining in our path to become champion. That'll have to wait though, as Rose interrupts the tournament to tell us all about his evil plan instead of, quietly executing the evil plan without us coming to stop him. Hop decides that we should try to recruit the legendary dogs to help us stop said evil plan, so we head over to the Slumbering Wheel to get some canine companions, but instead leave with some rusty medieval weaponry. Close enough, I guess. Before returning to Hammerlock to put an end to the darkest day, I stop by the Dusty Bowl to get my final horse of the run, Tyranitar, which I named Needlar. This guy will be invaluable in a bit, but for now he's staying in the box as we head to take on Chairman Rose. Upon finding Rose, he gives a whole speech about how from his point of view the Jedi are evil and how he's going to bring security and unlimited energy to his new empire or something, before challenging us to a battle. Unfortunately for Rose, his team is awful and he sucks at the game. His leader Scavalier goes down to Golok's Fire Punch, at which point this genius decides his best bet is to bring in Ferrothorn, also quad weak to fire. You'll never guess what happens to the Ferrothorn. His Berserker does have Shadow Claw and Throat Chop, so it's a bit risky to leave Golok in, but with only contact moves available, this cat is yet another victim for Beware with its Drain Punches. Berserker did drop my defense with Screech before it went down, so I switched Beware out into Excadrill to take the gear grind I expect to see from Kling Clang. but it's instead a Wild Charge, which is even better. I could take the KO here with Excadrill, but I want Hippowdon on the field when Rose's Copperajah comes in, so I can yawn it as it Gigantamaxes. Klinklang goes for a Shift Gear on my switch, boosting its attack and speed, but Hippowdon doesn't take too much damage from the Gear Grind on the next turn and hits the classic Yawn and Protect combo before 2 high horsepowers are enough to take out the snoozing Klinklang. As Copperajah comes in, I go for the usual anti-Gmax measure of Protect into Yawn to Protect. Technically, it would have been optimal to Yawn on the first turn so that Copperajah takes one of its sleep turns during its Gigantamax, but it doesn't make much difference. I hit it with a high horsepower once Gigantamax is over, but then I switch Hippowdon out, not wanting to risk high horsepower miss into first turn Wake Up. This ends up being a good play, as Copperajah does indeed get the turn 1 Wake Up and crits Beware for good measure, but it's much too little, much too late, as a Drain Punch ends the battle. After his defeat, Rose reveals that bringing about the Darkest Day meant summoning Eternatus, but that he's lost control of it and it needs to be stopped. Which, to be clear, means that he knew things were going disastrously wrong and still made me battle him, wasting my time that I could have been using to help. Right to the very last, Macrocosmos fights continue to be entirely pointless, and the story wouldn't change if they were removed. I make my way up to the roof of the power plant just in time for an admittedly pretty cool cutscene of Leon trying to catch the Harbinger of the End Times in a singular Pokeball. I think every adult in this game is just kinda stupid. I now have to fight regular Eternatus, which is time for Tyranitar to make its first appearance. The first phase of this is a breeze, since Eternatus can barely damage my leftovers Tyranitar, and 2 high horsepowers and some Sand Chip take it out. I now enter boss phase 2 alongside Hop, who once again decides to use his pathetic and useless Dubwool to try and take on a literal god. Much like the dogs at the start of the game, this Eternatus is initially in... But then we grab our rusty weapons, and one more very cool cutscene later, 2 dogs turn up and let us hit Eternatus again. Hop's Dubwool fires off some double edges that unironically do about the same damage to Eternatus as Sandchip does, while the dogs and I actually do the fighting. Eternatus does throw out a Max Flare at one point, so I switch into Hippowdon to reset my sand, while Zacian and Zamazen to deal out big damage with their anti-Dynamax moves. Although Hippowdon does eat a big Max Whirlwind on the way in, and Hop's Dubwool knocks itself out to recoil because it continues to be utterly useless. I've taken too much damage to be comfortable, so I elect to protect Hippowdon to avoid a potential crit KO. The dogs hit their big moves again, and then Hop, having contributed nothing to the entire fight, swoops in at the last second to steal the final hit with his Snorlax. What a freebooter. Now that Eternamax is defeated, I flex on Leon by succeeding to catch it in a Pokeball, and then I put it in my boxes forever because it isn't a horse and so I don't want it. With the literal end of the world resolved, it's finally time to actually take on Leon. I need to comment on how absolutely insane the level gap between the rest of the game and the final fight is. The last stage of the Champion Cup, you're up against trainers with 5 Pokemon that cap out at level 55. And then you fight Rose once, who has 5 Pokemon that cap out at 57, you fight 1 level 60 Eternatus, and then you suddenly have to fight Leon, who has 6 Pokemon, all between level 62 and 65. Like, genuinely crazy game design. Gripes with level curves aside, I spend a while crafting my team for this final fight, and land on a squad of Applejack the Appleton, Needler the Tyranitar, Rainbow Dash the Rapidash, Nock the Avalugg, Kelpie the Dreadnought, and Hippos the Hippowdon. With some new faces alongside some of the heroes that have carried me through key parts of the game, does this ragtag group of horses have what it takes to gallop to victory and claim their place as champions of the Galar region? The very last battle kicks off with Appleton facing down Leon's Aegislash. Leon loves to clip King Shield on turn 1, and I can punish by landing a Leech Seed. After a Protect on the following turn, the Leech Seed chip is enough for the frail blade form of Aegislash to go down to a high horsepower, but not before dealing a big chunk of damage with a Flash Cannon. Next up is Haxorus, and this is the sole reason Avalugg is making its debut in the very last battle of the run. With its insane physical defense, Big Lug shrugs off even outrages from the mighty dragon, and recovers itself back to health before a single avalanche makes short work of one of the scariest threats in the game. That's all that Big Lug needs to do in this entire playthrough, but it's a hell of a one thing to do. Lug makes way for Dreadnought, who completely walls the incoming Cinderace and lands the one-shot with Liquidation, bringing Seismitoad in. This is once again a job for Appleton, who unfortunately eats a Toxic on the way in. The tiny bit of Poison Chip puts the apple below half HP though, and a ripened Citrus Berry brings it back up to almost full before an Apple Acid takes out Seismitoad. Dragapult is Leon's penultimate Pokemon, which lets me position this endgame perfectly. Leon's Dragapult is a special attacker, so Tyranitar and its special defense boost from the sand it sets up can sit in front of it all day, especially with leftovers. That isn't necessary though, as a single crunch sends Pulp back to the afterlife. Dragapult did throw one final spanner into the works though, paralysing Tyranitar with its dying Dragon Breath. As has been the case in the past, this makes protecting in front of Gigantamax mons unsafe, and that rears its head here as Tyranitar is fully paralysed as I try to protect against a max overgrowth from Leon's signature Charizard. Thankfully, Tyranitar is an absolute unit of a horse in sand, and is able to take the hit anyway with HP to spare, even healing a little bit extra thanks to the grassy terrain that's now up. Turn 1 of Gigantamax done, but I am in a dire spot. I could make a sacrifice here for positioning and guarantee the win, and I am tempted to, but I think back to the vow that I made in Potato's name. No more horses dying on my watch. I see the line to a deathless victory, and it's not without risk, but my horses have been through worse and come out the other side, and I believe that they can do it. 2 more turns of Gigantamax, everyone makes it out alive. Here goes nothing. I'm pretty sure that Charizard will go for another max overgrowth now, as that's the only way it can KO T-Tar from here. If it goes for any other move, then I'm in trouble as I switch back to Appleton. But it is overgrowth. With the quad resistance to grass, Appleton takes it like an absolute champion. Toxic poison damage is offset by the grassy terrain recovery as the sandstorm dies down. And now there's only 1 more turn of Gigantamax left. This turn will either be Max Airstream or G-Max Wildfire from Charizard, but I'm not sure which. In either case, I've got 2 horses that can resist both, Tyranitar and Dreadnought. Switching into anything else is at best risking a crit max Airstream, and at worst almost certainly dead to a G-Max Wildfire plus the Wildfire passive damage plus another follow-up move on the next turn. Staying in and protecting with Appleton is an option, but I'm not sure it'll be able to take a max Airstream through Protect and then survive the increasing toxic damage at the end of the turn. It has to be a switch to one of my rock types. I really need the sand back up though for the special defense boost on both of them. If Dreadnought takes a G-Max Wildfire without the sand boost, there's a really good chance it goes down the following turn. Tyranitar will absolutely be able to switch in on G-Max Wildfire and take the initial hit, but it'll be very close with the passive damage afterwards. I make my decision. My play is to switch in Tyranitar and hope that Charizard either goes for a max Airstream, or if it goes for a G-Max Wildfire, that it somehow doesn't do enough damage to take out my bulky boy in the sand. I make the switch, Sandstream activates for my special defense boost, and Charizard uses Max Airstream! Tyranitar lives, and the deathless finale is all but secured. With Solar Beam not an option with the sand up, I can switch in Dreadnought to take next to nothing from a quad-resisted Fire Blast. With the Sand Boost active and Citrus Berry still intact, this battle is in the bag. One of my earliest horses, the saviour of my battle with Nessa, and an invaluable part of the team throughout the run, it feels only fitting that Kelpie is the one to take the team over the line. Charizard charges up one last desperate Solar Beam, but it'll never have a chance to use it, as a final liquidation wins not only the battle, but the entire run. And there you have it. You can beat a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokémon Shield with only horses. These games aren't exactly the hardest, and obviously the entire premise of this video is just a bit, but I've really enjoyed getting back into Nuzlocking, and I'd love to do more challenges like this. I'd personally really like to do some Nuzlocks of more difficult ROM hacks in the future to really challenge myself, so if that's the kind of content that you'd enjoy seeing, then please do drop a like and a sub on this video, just so I know there's an audience for it, and comment below if there are any particular Nuzlocks or ROM hack challenges that you'd like to see me do. If you want to watch me do challenges like these live, or you want to learn more about competitive VGC, then go ahead and follow my Twitch channel as well, the link to that is in the description. Happy April Fools, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye bye.